Today I'm in discussion with Riaz Kanani, serial entrepreneur, CEO and founder of Radiate B2B. During the last 10 years, Riaz has been involved with many startups, but for the last 4, his focus has been to build and deliver a marketing platform. This is designed to allow business-to-business companies to target and engage with specific functions within potential clients. Radiate B2B enables companies to increase their brand awareness, promote relevant content to the right audience, and identify organisations entering the buying phase. Riaz, your profile shows that you've spent a fair proportion of your life in startups. What's the attraction, and probably as important, what are the bits you don't like?
Yeah, it's probably 2/3. I haven't quite tracked it, but it's certainly a large portion of my career. I've actually probably thought about this a couple of times over 20 years, I guess, or something, as to why I ended up spending so much time in startups. When I was 14, I guess, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, I spent a lot of time with my parents around business and that sort of thing, and really, it was more, my interest was in business and finance and technology, and I didn't realize it, but psychology as well. And so when it came to doing things, for me, business was almost a hobby. And so, 16, I was helping companies to build websites and figure out what it meant for business, and it never really felt like a job. And so when it came to then building out a business properly, sort of thing, which I did right through university and onwards from there, again, it just felt like the natural thing to do. I was at university, and I applied for the big 4. I remember. I remember that it was right at the time of the dot-com bubble bursting, and I think it was PwC were building out their new media department, and they wanted me to come in and build it for them, and it was a really meaty challenge and really, really interesting, but my life would have been very different had I taken that role and not gone and built First Media, which eventually we exited to Silverpop. And it was a decision that probably made my life happier, I would have thought, because at that time, as I say, I didn't really sit down and think, oh, corporate life or startup life. It was more a case of what was the most interesting challenge for me to go after, that I liked. I guess I was lucky in that sense.
So you kind of mentioned there that it never really felt like a job. Do you still have that kind of feeling? Because obviously in a startup, you do sometimes get involved in, it's a life, not a job.
Yeah, completely. I definitely know a lot more today than I did 20 years ago, in the sense of what it means to make that decision. The decision, when you're in your early 20s, you have very little responsibility. It feels like you've got a lot of responsibility, certainly relative to being at university. But as you grow older, have kids, have a house, and start to take on more of that type of responsibility, building a business is a commitment that is not measured in weeks or months. It's measured in years, and you have to be prepared to take that on, sort of thing. And so, for me, I think I said 2011. I said I'd never do another startup, and I didn't for a small number of years. In the end, the irony was an MBA was what is part of what persuaded me to go back. And since then I've done 2 startups. One we set up, and a couple of years later we shut down, and it turned into the current account-based marketing or sales optimization platform that we're building today at Radiate.
And I'm assuming that this desire, love of startups or building businesses has somewhat of an impact on your family life.
Yeah, I think that would be an understatement. I mean, I've always been, I guess, business orientated is one way of putting it, I suppose. My wife actually is the same. She's quite entrepreneurial. She is one of those rare people who has studied fashion design and computer science, which astounds me still today.
Interesting combination.
Completely. And so she's she designs her own clothes. She has an e-commerce store on Instagram, and so we have to work together to make it work, basically.
It must be have been tough in the coronavirus epidemic if you're both doing pretty powerful jobs, both in the same building.
Yeah, luckily she has a full-time job alongside the e-commerce outlet, but she works in e-commerce actually for one of the big UK retailers, and so that's e-commerce is probably a good place to be at this time.
So which part of the phase of a startup do you like and which ones do you absolutely hate?
So I'm not sure the exact terminology, but the way I think of building startups is sort of a 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100 sort of framing, if you like, where 0 to 1 is you're sort of trying to figure out the startup itself. You're building it out and trying to get a product market fit is what they talk about, I guess. And then that 1 to 10 is where you start to put in place all the operations, and then 10 to 100 is where you scale it up to a major organization. And I think the irony is so I'm very good at that 10 to 100 piece. I know that and have done that quite a lot over my career. In fact, when I wasn't building startups, that's what I was doing from an operations or marketing standpoint. I think the bit that I enjoy the most is probably the 1 to 10, and then the 10 to 100 sort of time frame, where you're putting in place the processes and you're figuring out what works, and then you're scaling it and growing it. And I think there's two different reasons for that. So the 1 to 10, it's all about getting the product right, and I love figuring out how to make products work for the market. And then the 10 to 100 is really all about scaling people and scaling processes, which if there was something else that I love, that would be it. So by sort of definition, the bit that I hate the most is the 0 to 1 time, which it's just hard work, right? You've got the idea, you're really passionate about the problem that you're solving, but it is a roller coaster ride. That you never have enough money to do what you need to do. If you could just do X, then Y would happen. But of course, you can't jump ahead too quickly because the market's not ready, and so you have to learn about the market and twist and turn. And of course, you're never in control of the market. The market is doing what the market does, and you have to chop and change accordingly. So I remember with one of my startups, we were building content for content curation, automated content curation for business professionals, and the market at that particular time was very much moving towards publishers. That's where the revenue was to be had, and that was not a market I wanted to build a business in.
You're listening to the shortened version of this podcast. To listen to the full version, visit your favourite podcast player and search for Webtrends Optimize or The Big Lift.